iconic traditions, and it shaped Daytona days for generations of fans. The 60th running of the Daytona 500 is this Sunday at 2:30 Eastern on Fox, with pre-race coverage starting at 11. Now it's time for some stories to start your morning. Mike Shula, he'll be the new offensive coordinator of the New York Giants. Shula spent the last 7 seasons with the Panthers, first as QB coach and then as OC. So Chris Carter, what will his hiring mean for Eli, Odell, and the Giants?
Well, first of all, you have to look at Dave Gettleman, the general manager there. He hired someone he's familiar with. Their backgrounds both in Carolina. But if you look at the passing game in Carolina, very, very creative. They didn't have the natural talent of Odell Beckham, but I believe the huge influence is on the tight end Ingram. Look at Greg Olsen, how they integrated him into the passing game, dynamic deep down the football field. So I look to see some similarities in how they utilize the tight end.
Yeah, but please no zone reads with Eli Manning.
No.
We do not want to see that.
All shucks, Eli is not ready for that.
And you know, look what they did for Steve Smith in his career before he went over to Baltimore. But I think it's going to be fascinating to see what he can do with the run game. They were a dominant running team 2 years ago. 3 years ago now, I guess 3 seasons ago when they went to the Super Bowl. They were dominant. They put everybody on their heels in the NFC. They only lost 1 game in the regular season, lost 1 game in the Super Bowl, so 2 games overall. Can they run the football that could elongate Eli Manning's career? And the big question to me is, does this mean they want to draft Saquon Barkley? That this is a coach who's not going to be a development coach. This is a coach who's going to take a veteran quarterback and a veteran wide receiver and put a young running back in and try and win now. That's what's most interesting about the New York Giants.
All right, now on to Golden State Warriors. Steve Kerr, he decided to let some of his players do the coaching on Monday night's game. Kerr said yesterday that he was just amazed that this decision even was a story. Doug, are people making too big of a deal about this Kerr situation?
Yes, we make too big a deal about everything, right? We care about what LeVar Ball says while he's in Lithuania about his son who's not even currently playing for the Lakers. Of course we're going to hate on Steve Kerr because, you know, what has he done? Yeah. I mean, sure, he's got a couple championships, fine. Yeah. Okay, fine, he won 250 games faster than any coach in NBA history. Forget about the fact that he played for 2 other organizations that won championships, the 2 iconic coaches in the NBA in the modern era. What does he know? What is it Ebony, I don't know if it's this way over at Fox Business, but it's this way in sports. Everybody hates everything, even when it's Steve Kerr masterfully empowering his players to coach their own team.
And no different than New England. They hate a winner, you know, so Steve Kerr has won there. And since they've added Durant to the mix, they are easy to hate. But I like Golden State. I like the ownership. I like the organization, how they support the players. And Steve Kerr is trying to get his team to 4 NBA titles 3 NBA titles in 4 years. You got to do some unconventional things to be able to keep the interest of these players.
All right, moving on. The Cavs beat the Thunder last night, 120-112. Now, let's focus on a minute, though, on OKC. They've lost 6 of their last 8 games.
Right.
Chris Carter, why are they struggling?
Well, Doug, we talked about it earlier. They missed Roberson. The injury to him, it depletes their bench, so they don't get a lot of bench scoring. In the 108, Ebony, they scored last night, only 20 from the bench, and that was only 2 players. So it's hard to keep up with the explosive Western Conference if you're only getting that type of bench productivity. So injuries are a big part of the storyline, OKC.
It's a really smart point you make. You know, I think that what happens is people say, well, Andre Robertson couldn't score, right? So why would you miss him? Well, what happens is Alex Abrinas now is in the starting lineup.
Yes.
Previously, he was playing against backup players. And backups against it's a completely different sport, right? It's the same reason that, like Jamal Crawford, when he's been a 6th man, he's been super effective. When he's a starter, he's not one of the top 10-point guards in the league. It's just different. And so, one, I think their bench has been depleted by trades to acquire Carmelo and Paul George, by injury with Andre Robertson. And I think, like, look, Carmelo Anthony is a 3rd weapon. He's a little bit closer to Wash than he is superstar best scorer in the league, Carmelo. He's a jump shooter, and he also struggles to defend. So their defense isn't as good without Robertson. It makes it more obvious that Carmelo can't defend, and their bench has been depleted.
The first half of the season, they were the elite team defensively. That slipped off.
Big time. Okay, finally, Houston Rockets beat the Timberwolves last night, 126-108. James Harden led the way with 34 points and 13 assists. And don't look now, but the Rockets, well, they're just half a game back from the Warriors in the West. Chris Carter, how real of a threat is Houston to Golden State?
I think they're a real threat. I think that, and this is what I've seen. Last week we went to Brooklyn, Nick and myself, to watch them. And how they close out games, I think is very interesting. We saw in the past with James Harden last year a lot of isolation. So with Chris Paul, with both of them being ball dominant, what would they do? You see, they're not running as much isolation. They do a lot of pick and roll, and they do some ball movement to close out games. So I think that they've gotten better at that. I believe that Chris Paul would be up to the challenge in the playoffs to kind of be able to get this off of his resume as far as flops in the playoffs and or being injured. Yep. The battles that he'll have with the point guards that are in the West, I mean, are dynamic. So those are the things that I see, the overall mental change in the psyche of Houston. They brought in some tough players. Sure. B.J. Tucker, Chris Paul, and a number of other guys to bring some grit to that team. Was basically a three-point shooting team. So I'm interested to see how this plays out in the playoffs, and does the success in the regular season transfer over to playoff basketball.
I do feel like there's a little of Shooter McGavin with the Rockets, right? Like, we're all talking about the Cavs, and we talk about everything else, and they're sitting there going, we're too busy winning, right? We're sitting here winning. That's what it's supposed to be about. But I still struggle to buy into the idea this is a championship caliber roster, because in basketball, you are what your best player is. And James Harden still is not really invested at the defensive end. James Harden still overhandles the basketball. Yes, Chris Paul is going to help take some of that pressure off him, and it has worked out better when healthy than I think anybody could have thought. But when you have Chris Paul, who I would agree with you, the narrative is wrong. It should be more about being injured in the playoffs than being inept in the playoffs. That Clipper team was never healthy, so we never really know how good they could have been. But Chris Paul hasn't won the postseason. He hasn't won the postseason. D'Antoni hasn't won the postseason. And the style of shooting 30 or 40 threes in big playoff games hasn't won in the postseason. The reason the Warriors have won these championships is their defensive numbers, that they shut you down, that they shut off your water at some point in the game. And that's not how this Houston team is constructed better, but it still has that inherent flaw of their best player not being bought in at the defensive end, as opposed to the Warriors, who have gotten more buy-in from Kevin Durant defensively than at any other point in time.
Now, one thing I do think is very important, Doug, I'll get your opinion on this, is I believe it's important that Houston has home court advantage. I don't believe it's important that Cleveland in the East, and I don't believe it's that important for Golden State. But I do believe that Houston, them having that in their back pocket where they would be able to, if it got to 7 games, that being in the Western Conference semifinals or in the finals, that game would be played in Houston. I believe it would help out to be able to exercise some of those demons that D'Antoni has, that Paul has, and James Harden.
Yeah, but didn't they lose Game 6 last year? I think was at home. So they have lost at home in big play. And that was when it looked like James Harden just kind of shut it down out of frustration, right? Did the Kobe Bryant, where you're going to have to get me some better players. It'd be fascinating to see who goes.
I think if they get to the end of the regular season, they have the best record as a sense of accomplishment, knowing that they will be judged on the postseason. I think having that in their back pocket, I believe, can help some teams, and I believe Houston's one of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, if I'm them, I just want to avoid. It's more important who I'd match up for before Golden State, right? Like we just kind of took down Oklahoma City, but I don't think they want to play Oklahoma City. I think that could be a tough matchup. That could be a 6 or 7. Like, one of the magic to why the Warriors were so fresh and so rested and could dominate the Cavs, it only took them 12 games to get through the playoffs last year.
Very
right?
efficient.
Like, and I actually think, like, the new composition of the Cavaliers is better for a longer playoff run because they have better depth. It may not be better in a Game 7 when it's about your stars, but games 1 through 6, they do have some bench. I think Houston is pretty well equipped for a longer. They have a little bit better bench than the Golden State Warriors do. I'm a little suspicious of this bench, although Golden State could add somebody in the buyout market. But to me, it's more important. This is me, not home court advantage, but can you avoid the Spurs? Right? If I'm Houston, I want nothing to do with the Spurs. If they have Kawhi Leonard back, I do not want them. And if I can avoid the Spurs and the Thunder, even better.
A really quick question. Joe Johnson, does he help Houston, and why?
I don't understand. Like, Joe Johnson's been ISO Joe, right? Like, look, Joe Johnson's going to get buckets. He's like, Vince Carter can still dunk at 41. We just showed the highlights. Joe Johnson at 41 could still get 20 a night. But the ball stops, and it goes completely
counterproductive.
Well, Mike D'Antoni's like, I want ball movers, not ball stoppers. So you get Chris Paul is like, all right, I'm going to move it more, but the ball still slows a little bit. Now you're going to get Joe Johnson, like that thing. That's your team is built for one style, and now you're getting parts that fit another style. So, like in a video game, does it work? Hell yeah. Okay, but life ain't playing a video game. It's played in real life with guys with egos, and they get the ball, and they played one way for 15 years, and now you're telling them to play another. I think it actually might be subtraction by a little bit of addition.
Yeah, I think my partner Nick Wright's going to enjoy that. He kind of likes Houston,
can't wait to hear about that. So we're going to get back to the Cavs here. Now, they've been on a roll recently, right? And it's not just the new guys. Looks like new LeBron, who it is. He's averaging 30 points, 13 assists, and 9.5 boards during Cleveland's 4-game win streak. Doug, is LeBron in the conversation? Is he making an aggressive push for MVP?
I mean, look, he's looked great. I mean, he's played great since he's gotten this new cast of characters. And even remember the last game before the trade, he was incredible. He hits the game-winning fadeaway against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, yeah, here's the one problem. They were bad when they had LeBron. They changed players, and now they're good when they have LeBron. If it's truly most valuable, well, then the value is in the supporting assets, not in LeBron James. But the MVP has never truly been about who's the most valuable. It's about who's had the best season. And he was having a remarkable season for about 2 months, and then he went through this swoon, and now he's having a remarkable couple of games. So is he in the conversation? Yeah. I mean, James Harden's been more valuable and probably better throughout the entire season, and probably should have won it 1 or 2 times previously. But I would say LeBron is absolutely in the conversation, and he's played like the best player in the game the past 2 games.
Quick follow-up, though, Doug. When you talk about most valuable, somebody that was sitting in this chair the past 2 days said that it is LeBron who's essentially primarily made those 4 guys around him so successful. So would that be built into the calculus of his value?
Yeah, but if that was the case, then why didn't he make the previous cast?
Well, that's what Chris Carter was saying.
Last 18 games before that, they were 6 and 12. So we can't always build a house on what Nick is putting as the foundation. All right, but what I think is LeBron had played so spectacular. But with Houston being a half game from Golden State, most valuable, what he's meant to that franchise this year, bringing over Chris Paul, and people, and you got the question, can they play together? Yeah. 2 ball-dominant guys, they've worked it out. And when Paul, Capella, and Harden are in the lineup, I mean, that combination is like something that we haven't seen in recent dates. So I think that Harden has a little bit of an edge, but I think that what could swing it back to LeBron is that in this 30 games with these 4 new teammates, if they play spectacular, if they maybe potentially end up with the number 2 seed, and Houston's the number 2 seed in the West, then you have to build a way, man, wow, how much of an impact with LeBron these last third of the season, and that could tilt it in LeBron's favor. Now, LeBron has something negative like Michael Jordan. He could have been MVP a lot of those years.
Yeah. Sure.
But they owe Harden one. So is this the year that they pay Harden back for the 2 previous great seasons that he did have?
Probably if they finish with the best record in the NBA.
How do y'all feel about that, though? Just, as pro athletes at some point, both of you, how do you feel about those kind of retroactive accolades for something you did in the past?
It's the reality of it, right? It's the reality of, all right, we owe him, like Karl Malone got one year. We're like, we got to recognize Karl Malone, right? And
is that fair, though, for the person that's actually the best that year?
I mean, Aaron Rodgers should have won it going back to last season, right? Because they didn't lose a game coming down the stretch to end up carrying a team in the playoffs. But Matt Ryan had the better season, so we gave him the MVP award.
Right. This is the problem, because when you're great, the expectations you have just on a normal season, for you, it's like, wow, how good was LeBron? Well, that's his normal. 27, 8, and 8. That's what he does. So now these players you have to play greater than a great player, and then they might make you, it's like your job. They don't pay you the first week, make you do a week in the hole. you know, and then they pay you the next week.
Sure.
So I think that it works out in the long run.
Okay.
It stops from also somebody having a spectacular one season and them getting the MVP.
Okay.
You know, so I like how it works out.
Okay, let me bring up a name we've not brought into this conversation yet, and that is Steph Curry. He's on the team that everybody's still saying is the overwhelming favorite to win the title. Where does he fit into the MVP discussion?
I don't think you even put him ahead. He's had a run here where you're like, oh yeah, when Steph is right, he's unbelievable. But I still think I would put Durant ahead because what Durant contributes offensively is similar and yet maybe even less guardable. And then he's contributing more at the defensive end than he has at any other point in time. And look, they're going to split votes. It's just that's the problem of it.
But that's part of signing off. If you're going to play together, like you're going to be, you not necessarily cancel each other out. But you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between how they're playing.
It's interesting though. That to me is one of the things that I think fans sometimes lose sight of. Like there are people that forever hold it against Kevin Durant for going and signing up with the Warriors. But to me, that shows a sacrifice of ego. Because that's saying like, yeah, I'll probably never win an MVP award again. Okay.
And it's made him a better defensive player.
Right. So I'll be a finals MVP, which is better. Or maybe even not a finals MVP, but I'll win championships. And, like, look, the MVP conversation is cool, but, you know, Kobe won 1. Michael could have won 10 of them. It didn't really matter. We really, truly judge people's greatness, especially in basketball, based upon the number of championships they won.
Absolutely.
It's harder in football because there's so many other moving parts, so many other players. But yet in basketball, it's how many of the big rings did you actually win? And the MVP is an interesting discussion. I think that we take it too literally, value. LeBron has the most value. Durant has more value. James Harden's brought a ton of value to Houston, but he's had 3 great seasons, and this one has allowed his team to compete for the best record in the NBA. He'll probably win it, even though LeBron last 2 games has looked like the best player in the league.
Right. The numbers always tell a story, and LeBron having 32 double-doubles and 10 triple-doubles. Now, he might end the season with 15 to 20 triple-doubles. He have 20 triple-doubles. LeBron's going to edge him out.
But he also had 7 weeks where he had the lowest plus-minus in the league. And you
think people will remember that though when it comes to when it comes time to make that MVP decision? Are they going to go back in the archives, so to speak?
That's what becomes important for people like us to bring it up.
Because we're saying like, look, if LeBron is so great and so valuable, why do they have to change everything else around him?
Because I'm going to have a few debates with a guy sitting over there.
If LeBron is so good, why were they? What was the record? 6-14 of the last
20? Out of 18, 6-12.
6 and 12.
Go ahead and get that paperwork going, Doug.
Okay, good.
With that, coming up, you will not believe what one Cowboys legend had to say about his old team. That's next. Stay with us. First things first. Make sure you put at the top LeBron question mark.
12.
I'm going to need that.
Neil Lane designed